The year was 1851, and the Sierra Nevada mountains gleamed with a promise that lured men from across oceans, the promise of gold. But for most who came, riches meant a dream that would fade with the dying campfires of failed diggers. Yet beyond the glitter of the gold rush, there were other riches, buried not in the earth, but in the hearts of those who endured. Caleb Turner had crossed half the world chasing that promise. He'd left Missouri with a mule, a pickaxe, and the foolish belief that he'd come home a rich man. But 2 years into the California gold rush, all he had to show for it were calloused hands, an empty pouch, and a heart full of dust. He had staked claims in dry gullies, frozen rivers, and barren hillsides. He'd watched men shoot each other over pebbles that weren't even gold. The only thing he hadn't lost was his quiet determination. Still, when the winter of '51 came hard and bitter, even that began to crack. The snow had come early that year, blanketing the camp near Hangtown. Caleb sat by his weak fire, nursing the last of his coffee, when a shadow appeared out of the white. "You got room by that fire?" the stranger asked. Caleb looked up. The man was older, with gray in his beard and eyes that had seen too much. His coat was patched, his boots worn through at the toes. Caleb nodded. "Fire's small, but it's warm," he said. The man sat, rubbing his hands. "Name's Silas Pike," he said. "Been mining these parts since '49. You, Caleb Turner, Missouri." "Ah," Silas said with a dry chuckle. "Another dreamer come west." Caleb smiled thinly. "Aren't we all?" For a while, they sat in silence, listening to the hiss of snow hitting flame. Then Silas said, "You looking for gold?" "That's the plan," Caleb said. "Though I'm starting to think the only gold here's in the stories folks tell." Silas leaned closer, eyes glinting. "You ever wonder if maybe the real riches ain't in the ground?" Caleb frowned. "Then where?" Silas didn't answer. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, worn leather pouch. Inside were a few nuggets of gold, dull and small, hardly worth the trouble. "These," he said, "ain't worth half what I paid to find 'em. But out there," he pointed to the snow-covered pines, "out there's land. Fresh air, a chance to build something that'll last longer than any vein of gold." Caleb looked away, unimpressed. He'd heard talk like that before, men who'd failed at mining convincing themselves they'd found a higher purpose. But something in Silas's tone stuck with him. That night, as the storm held through the valley, Silas told stories of the early days, of boomtowns that rose and fell overnight, of men who struck it rich and died broke, of a woman named Eliza who once ran the only clean boarding house in Hangtown and made more money than any miner. "Riches," Silas said, poking the fire, "ain't about what you dig up. It's about what you make, what you keep, what you give." By morning, the snow had stopped, and Silas was gone. He'd left behind a small tin cup and a note scratched on bark, "Head north past the river. You'll see what I mean." Caleb wasn't sure why, but he followed. 2 days later, hungry and half frozen, he came upon a valley that took his breath away. A river cut through the middle, sparkling under the winter sun. Tall pines stood like sentinels on either side. Smoke rose from a small cabin near the bank. As he approached, a woman stepped out, rifle in hand. Her eyes were sharp, her face wind-burned but kind. "You're trespassing," she said firmly. "Didn't mean to," Caleb said, raising his hands. "Just looking for a man named Silas Pike." The woman's expression softened. "Silas was my father," she said quietly. "He passed last spring." Caleb's throat tightened. "I'm sorry to hear that." She nodded, motioning him closer. "Come inside. You look half-starved." The cabin was simple but warm. Logs neatly stacked by the hearth, shelves lined with jars of dried berries and herbs. The woman introduced herself as Nora Pike. She'd lived there since her father fell ill, tending the land and keeping his memory alive. Over a meal of stew and bread, Caleb told her how he'd met Silas only once, and about the note that led him here. Nora smiled sadly. "That sounds like Pa. He always believed this valley was his true fortune. Said the world was too busy chasing gold to see the riches right in front of them." Caleb looked out the window. The river glittered like a vein of silver. The air smelled of pine and promise. He began to understand. In the weeks that followed, Caleb helped Nora repair fences, chop wood, and plant early crops. He'd never known peace like that. No shouting prospectors, no greedy claims, no gunfights over dust. Just hard work and quiet satisfaction. Every night, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, he'd sit by the fire and think of Silas's words. It's about what you make, what you keep, what you give. Spring came, and with it, life returned to the valley. Wildflowers bloomed along the river. The soil turned rich and dark. One morning, as Caleb was mending a fence, Nora came running from the cabin. "Caleb," she called, "come quick." She held out a small gold pan. Inside were a few glittering specks. He laughed. "Looks like your father's valley's richer than we thought." Nora shook her head, smiling. "No, it's not about the gold. I just thought it was funny. Pa said the land itself was our fortune." Caleb looked at the pan, then at Nora. Her eyes shone in the morning light. For the first time, he realized what Silas had meant all along. They worked side by side through the seasons, building something stronger than any mine, a home. Caleb planted an orchard where the ground was softest. Nora raised chickens and kept bees. When travelers passed through, they offered them food and shelter. Word spread of Pike's Valley, a place where no man went hungry and no one left empty-handed. Years rolled on. Gold fever faded, and the boom towns turned to ghost towns. But Pike's Valley thrived. Children were born, trees grew tall, and the land gave more than it took. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Caleb would walk down to the river and watch the water flow. He'd think of the thousands of men still chasing fortune in far-off hills, digging, dreaming, dying. And he'd smile, because he'd found something far richer. When Silas Pike had said there were riches beyond the gold, he hadn't been talking about money or land. He'd been talking about a kind of wealth that couldn't be stolen or lost, the wealth of peace, purpose, and love. Years later, when Caleb was an old man, sitting by the same fire he'd once shared with a stranger in the snow, he told his grandson the same words Silas had told him. "Riches," he said softly, "ain't about what you find. It's about what you build, what you keep in your heart, and what you leave behind." The boy looked up at him, wide-eyed. "Did you ever find gold, Grandpa?" Caleb smiled, glancing out the window where Nora was tending the garden. "Oh, I found plenty," he said. "Just not the kind you melt down." The valley outside shimmered under the setting sun, the river like a ribbon of fire, the fields golden with harvest. Somewhere beyond those hills lay the graves of men who died chasing dreams. But here, life had taken root. Beyond the gold rush, Caleb Turner had found riches far deeper than gold, the kind no man could dig out of the earth. And so the story of Pike's Valley lived on, not in ledgers or claims, but in the laughter of children, the scent of wildflowers, and the soft murmur of the river that had carried one man to his true fortune. In the end, the West had given Caleb Turner everything it had promised, not the glitter of gold, but the quiet glow of a life well lived. And that, he finally understood, was the richest treasure of all.